Chapter 27, October 12th. I messed up with Jake last night. I've been working so hard to gain his trust and build a connection with him that I didn't stop to think. I didn't think how he would react to a stranger in the house. I didn't think he would try to protect me, that he wants to keep me safe. I can hardly see the page, even when I wipe the tears away. Sweet Jake, after all the stories I've told him about descendants and guardians and heroes and demons, he's taken them to heart. Just because his mind is keeping him from communicating right now doesn't mean he didn't understand more. I'm so stupid for not thinking how much he would understand and that he'd want to be the one to help protect me. I'm so stupid for not thinking of how much he would understand and that he'd want to be the one to help protect me. I'm too upset to talk to him right now, but I will apologize to him soon. I will try to reach him without hurting him again. Does that mean staying away from Treadon? Maybe. I need to stop playing like a child and grow up. I've said yes to the date, but I need to cut it off. I can't lead him on like this, not when I can't give him all of me, not when I've already been torn in half. Like the boy on the road. The accident happened so fast, in a blink. I didn't have time to call out, to warn him, before the car slammed into him, tossing his body off the road and into the forest. The car didn't slow down, hit and run, or maybe it was so dark and the boy so small that they didn't even realize they'd hit something. I don't really believe that, but I will never know. I want to give the benefit of the doubt, believe that ordinaries are better than that, than leaving a boy crushed and bleeding on the side of the road. I know that most of them are better, and that some of them are not. I've seen the darkness they're capable of since then. I crawled over to the boy's body. He'd landed on his back, blood coming from a gash in his head. His chest had taken most of the impact and was crushed, ribs broken, too bad enough to have punctured his lungs. The boy held his hands against the open wounds in his chest, like he was trying to hold himself together. There was blood on the ground, and blood rushing through my ears. There was no time to get help, no time left before the boy's energy would be gone, and there would be nothing for me to increase. I couldn't heal him after he was dead. I had only healed small things, a bird's wing, a paper cut on my brother's finger, a nosebleed. This was none of those things, but I couldn't sit there and watch him die. It wasn't who I was. As terrified as I was, I reached out and touched the boy's bloodied hand. Abigail Nelson. What do you see? The deep baritone of Gabe's voice sent familiar chills down Abigail's spine. She crossed her arms to cover an involuntary shiver. She turned from the map to face him. He wore his black biking leathers, and his chin sported a rough shadow of a beard. His blue eyes were soft as he watched her wipe the tears from her cheeks. There's a light, a bright one, only a few hours away, Abigail said, voice steady, like she could pretend everything away. Tell me where. Abigail turned away, unable to meet his gaze. What if it doesn't do any good? I haven't been much use lately. You saved Paige, and dozens of children before her. We can't stop trying just because we've lost a few. His large frame filled the doorway, his voice too low and tender to come from his warrior's frame, but it was something she loved about him. Another thing that broke her heart when she thought of his bonding to another. Her deep yearning was a pain so deeply embedded that she thought of it as part of her now. Someone is beating us to them, Abigail said, and they know who I am. No. Gabe shook his head and took a half step toward her. They know there is a watcher, but not who or where. What if they find us? I will never let that happen. Gabe's eyes hardened, his fists clenched, the tender moment gone. You know you can't promise that. She saw the truth of her words slam into Gabe, his breath catching, his shoulders hunching a fraction of an inch. And you owe me more than a promise. Abigail felt her resolve weaken. Gabe had always been her weakness. She turned to the pictures hanging on the wall, tracing a frame with one finger. It was a picture of Gabe and Treadon next to the ocean. Gabe held Treadon's hand as they jumped over the waves. It was from the early days, before the Unguarded started disappearing, when they delivered messages and took Treadon with them. Abigail didn't always understand the messages they were delivering, but it was a time when Gabe was lighter and Treadon was younger. He's almost a man now. He doesn't need your protection anymore, Gabe said. You need to let him make a choice, and ask him to die for a cause that was never his. Abigail let the unspoken part fall to the floor between them, the way she was asked, the way she gave up everything for a cause that was never hers, when Gabe could never be hers. He needs to know who you are, and what you've fought for all these years. Abigail turned, back straight. I will not let him be dragged into the life that destroyed his father. Gabe's face registered pain. He looked down. Go. Maybe we can save this one, if you hurry. Abigail looked away as the tears started again. She felt like she was being torn in half each time they risked being discovered, potentially leading the hunters to their own front door. She felt his presence behind her. He had stepped closer, close enough to touch, but his hands remained pressed against his side. I'm scared. She pressed her fingers against the sides of her head. She could feel some kind of pressure there, growing. I'm scared that we are going to be swept away in the darkness. I can feel it, and it will be all my fault. I will find the ones taking the Unguarded, Gabe said. I will stop this. And you will find her, Abigail said. Gabe wasn't just looking for the Unguarded. He still had a lost descendant to find. He hoped each time a new light appeared that somehow it would be her. It chipped a piece of Abigail's heart each time. Promise you'll keep Treadon safe if something happens to me. Nothing will happen to you. He was close enough that she could feel his shadow, the absence of his touch. Abigail turned, their faces close, his body stiff as if pressed up against a wall. The tears dried on her cheeks. She waited. I will protect Treadon with my life. Abigail nodded. Then go. North of Bakersfield. Hurry. Gabe paused, and for a moment, Abigail thought he might break through the wall he'd built, lean toward her, and reach out a hand. Instead, he turned on his heel and left the room. Abigail leaned against Gabe's desk, smoothing out the map that was already perfectly smooth. She watched Gabe's light leave the garage and head toward the white light halfway across the state. Her eyes wandered to the perpetual motion device as it twisted in the air. 3 circles with marbles, blue, yellow, and green, twisting intricately, eternally, to remind her there would be no end to the pain. Less than 45 minutes later, Abigail watched Gabe's light approach the outskirts of Bakersfield. The map was a high-tech gadget that one of the first Unguarded they'd rescued made for her. Abigail had always been able to perceive the aura around people, each person pulsing in their own unique signature. When she met Gabe, she'd been fascinated by his aura. It was brighter than any human being she'd ever met, even though he was on the verge of collapse. He was lost and alone, and her heart was drawn to him, even back then. She brought him home out of curiosity and charity. That decision changed everything. She used 2 fingers against the map and pulled them apart, zooming in the view. It was a screen of sorts, but as thin as a piece of paper, with the ability to let her use her vision from a bird's-eye view. It allowed her to help Gabe from a distance, instead of traveling everywhere with him. It gave Treadon more of a life. The front door slammed open, and she heard voices in the living room. Abigail jumped, running to the wall that held Gabe's weapons. It was too late. They were already in the house. She crept to the door and peeked into the living room. She let out a sigh of relief. It was Jaren and Rachel, sitting down at the kitchen table, opening a laptop. Treadon walked in just as Rachel and Jaren settled at the kitchen table. Abigail turned back and checked the map. Gabe was a few minutes away, and the light still shone from the image on the desk. Mom? Abigail bit her lip. Not wanting to leave, not wanting Treadon to come in, she quickly went out into the living room. Is everything okay? She stopped when she saw the look on Treadon's face. His smile lit his face and filled her son with the joy that pulsed out of his aura. Treadon crossed the room and wrapped her up. A hug and a spin that left her dizzy. How long had it been since she'd seen Treadon this happy? You're great, you know that? Treadon set her back down, hands dropping back to his side, like he'd just realized they had an audience. Your shoulder? Abigail asked. So much better. Treadon's smile widened. I just needed to rest it for a day. I'm going to be able to play this weekend. Treadon slapped Jaren on the shoulder and grabbed a soda from the refrigerator, tossing one around to each person. Abigail caught hers and held it against her chest, the warmth of the hug still humming through her. What's gotten into you? Jaren asked. Nothing's up with me, Treadon said. How's the investigation? Rachel crossed her arms. We've got a guy willing to meet us about XC energy, but he's very secretive. He's got no history, no social media, no records. It's like he doesn't exist. But as interesting as that is, you need to spill. What's going on?" Treadon leaned back on his chair, balancing on 2 legs as he popped the soda open. "I've got a date with an angel." Abigail's fingers went numb, and her soda slipped before she could catch it. It hit the floor with a pop, and she bent over to hide the color that she knew had filled her face. It was a normal comment. A boy with a crush. It should fill her with joy instead of this dread. But she couldn't help it. She checked to see if the 3 of them had noticed her reaction. No one was looking at her. Jaren stared at Treadon with his mouth open, shaking his head. "No wonder you're still a virgin." Abigail let them laugh as she slipped back into the office and touched the map. Oh no. The light was gone. Gabe's light was still there, moving at impossible speeds, but the bright white light of the Unguarded was already gone. She scrolled the image around and zoomed in, knowing it was too late, knowing exactly where the light should have been, and that it was no longer there. Abigail didn't realize she was crying until a drop fell off her chin and splashed onto the map between her fingers. She finally lifted her hands and let the map snap back into place. She took a deep breath and reached for the CB radio. "It's too late. They've taken them." She released the button. Crackling static came through the speakers, and then Gabe's voice. "When?" She'd lost another one. This time, she didn't even watch the light disappear. That's what the man had called her, a watcher. And maybe that's all she would ever be.